Good afternoon folks, welcome to Visordown. My name is Toad and today we are at Riders Motorcycles in Nottingham and I am undertaking another investigation to find out if the Voge DS625X is a viable alternative to a middleweight adventure bike such as a Honda CB500X or maybe even a KTM 790. So that's what I've come here today to do. I've been riding this little DS625 all day today. These things are literally just off the boat from China and MotoGP invited me up to have a little play on it today and see what I thought. So as ever, I'm going to take you through the specs, take you through how it rides, and then at the end give you the verdict on whether or not it's a viable alternative to something like a Honda CB500 or another middleweight adventure bikes. So, powering the bike, we have got a 581cc parallel twin with a cross-plane crank. It puts out 63 bhp claimed, and you've got 57 newton meters of torque from the engine. The engine has got a lot to do with Honda's CB500X engine that I just mentioned, and the reason being is Launceston take that engine and sort of redesign it, reconfigure it, put a new crank in it, stroke it, bore it, whatever they need to do to get the extra capacity that they needed to put it into this bike here. In the chassis, we have got a steel cradle frame, we have got KYB suspension at the front, which is fully adjustable, and we've got a KYB monoshock at the rear, which is also fully adjustable. Braking wise at the front, you've got Nissan 2-piston calipers, so a pair of those at the front and a single Nissan caliper at the rear. There is no IMU controlled ABS on this thing, so it's just a conventional 2-channel ABS system, which does also mean that you've only got conventional traction control as well, although that is switchable. Everything else about the bike really, so it's a shade over 200 kilograms wet, I think 206 kilograms wet, and that is with fuel. And you've got a seat height of 835 millimeters, which means it's one of the more fairly accessible middleweight adventure bikes in the class, which is all good for someone like me. You've got two colours, you've got a black one, I think they call it Black Knight or something. You've got this one that they call Desert Yellow, which isn't actually yellow, it's obviously a khaki colour, but they're the options on that one. But where this bike gets interesting is the list of things that it has got fitted as standard, which a bit like the Morbidelli that I was riding the other week, you are getting a lot of things as standard on the little Voge. So I'm going to go through them, got them written down here. You've got backlit switchgear, you've got a tyre pressure monitoring system, you've got a 12-volt socket, and you've got conventional USB socket as well. You've got full LED lighting, auxiliary lighting, you've got a centre stand, height adjustable screen, you've got hand guards, 7-inch TFT dash, you've got the big chunky engine protection down there, which is really good to see because a lot of companies in this sort of price bracket, if they say it's got an engine guard on it, it'll be made out of a biscuit tin, so that is good to see. And you've got switchable daytime running lights, and you get the rear rack as standard. So the only things that you can add to it are the heated seat, the heated grips, and also the luggage. This bike has also got another thing which I think might be a first in the two-wheeled world, and that is it's got a dash cam. Up underneath the windscreen there at the front of the bike, there is a tiny little 1080p camera that feeds into a little box underneath the seat. You slip in a mini micro SD card into there and it will just record a minute and then a minute and then a minute until the card's full, and then it will just start overwriting as well. It's not quite GoPro clear, but as you can see from the video that you're looking at on the screen now, it's perfectly legible for a little dash cam to have on a bike such as this. So that's really interesting to see on there. As I say, I think it might be a first in the two-wheeled world to have that sort of stuff fitted as standard to the front of a bike, especially in this sort of price bracket. So, on with the review. So I'm going to start off with the engine of it because it's quite an interesting unit with its kind of like, you know, the DNA of the engine, or at least some of the design of the engine is quite openly very similar to the CB500X, which is an absolute peach of a motor. It feels punchy enough for a sub 600 cross-plane twin. It definitely feels punchy enough. It seems to rev and rev and rev. It revs right the way up to 10,000 RPM, and it still gives good power right at the top. It doesn't run out of puff when you've got through the mid-range. The mid-range torque is quite strong, and also low down, it's not too bad either. So on that respect, it's a very tractable motor all the way through the rev range, which is great. The throttle connection of it, I did have a little bit of an issue with, and the reason being is there's quite a lot of sort of like a dead zone, almost like a lot of free play in the throttle, which is okay, but when you're sort of picking up the throttle coming out of a slower corner, for instance, it can make that feel clumsy, because if you use up the dead zone or the free play in the throttle and then open it again, you're not when you're opening the throttle, you're not getting the throttle butterflies to open. There's a little sort of hesitation in there, sort of built into the throttle cable. It would be nice if there's some sort of adjustment and you could sort of dial that out a little bit. But that was the only real thing I noticed about the throttle connection. Other than that, the engine feels nice. You've got 2 modes to play with. You've got an eco and a sport mode. It's really just the throttle map that's changing. The actual power of the engine, it remains exactly the same, and obviously it tweaks the traction control as well, I think. Has got a slipper clutch fitted to it, which is mated to a 6-speed gearbox. The gearbox overall is very good. It feels slick, it feels direct. The only time that I had any issues with it was if I was clutchless shifting, going up from second to third when I was really pushing it. Occasionally you'd hit a false neutral on the way up and I'd need 2 bites of the cherry, but you know, you're doing something that the bike probably wasn't really designed for anyway on that respect, so it's not a massive negative on the thing. I've got to say that the clutch on this thing is absolutely feather light. It's probably one of the lightest clutch levers that I've ever felt, and that's all down to that slipper clutch as well, which is good. When you're decelerating, coming down the gears, you can get the rear tyre to lock even with the slipper clutch just by coming down 2 or 3 gears and then dumping the clutch. You will lock the rear wheel. That's a lot of fun because it means you can sort of slide the back end into corners. That's a lot of fun for me because it means you can slide the back end into corners. If it was wet or you're an inexperienced rider, it might be worth something. It might be something that you just need to look out for, just to keep an eye on to save yourself from locking the back wheel when the conditions are a little bit slippy. Overall though, the engine is one of the bike's strong points, but again, that's no real surprise when you think about where the design and where the architecture of that engine originally came from. You know, it's all down to Lonsin using that intellectual property once the rights have come away, and China's fairly loose interpretation of copyright laws. So I'm going to move on to the electronics. So like I said, 2 riding modes, eco and sport. I found myself spending more time in sport than in the eco mode. Obviously, we were riding quite sportily today. The eco map is very soft, and sport is generally where you want to spend most of your time. The sport mode does accentuate that choppy feeling of the throttle because you get a sharper throttle connection in sport, but it's you just kind of end up riding around it, and it didn't really bother me towards the end of the day because I kind of worked out how to use the bike without that getting in the way. The traction control system on the bike is switchable, and unless it's wet or rainy, you will want it turned off almost all of the time. And the reason for that is if you get any sort of triggering of the traction control system, so even if you get a tiny bit of front wheel lift, the wheel speed sensor will trigger the traction control system, but then what it won't do is it won't disengage the traction control. So you'll be riding along for, could be up to 10 or 15 seconds afterwards, and the traction control light will still be illuminating when all wheels are on the floor and there's absolutely no out of control riding going on. It still engages the traction control, which was a little bit frustrating. A couple of times if you lifted the front over a crest, it'd slam back down again on the traction control, but then you couldn't make any progress because the traction control was still cutting all the power and cutting all of the throttle connection. It is a gripe that I've got, but it's worth mentioning. Happily, the ABS system isn't anywhere near as intrusive as the traction control, which is good. So you haven't got any issues on that respect whatsoever. One thing I do like about it is the TFT dash, which is very clear and very easy to read. There's not really too many menus to go into. You can just change the modes, turn the traction control off, turn the ABS off as well if you like, and then you've just got the buttons up here to flick through whether you want the odometer or the trip meter, and a few other bits and bobs. But other than that, there's not really much to say about it. It's just very nicely laid out and clear and easy to read TFT dash, which is great. You also get the Bluetooth connectivity with it also, which is very, very good. So I'm going to move on to the handling. Obviously, there are good points and there are bad points, and I'm going to start right at the very beginning of the ride as we pulled out of Bikers Motorcycles here in Nottingham, and we pulled out, rode through town, and then we got out onto the twisties. And with a full tank of fuel, this did feel quite top heavy. It's only a 17.6 litre tank, but I have a feeling that it sits right on top of the engine and there's nothing really hidden underneath the seat. It feels like a lot of the weight is up here, especially on a full tank. What that meant is as you were going into a corner, you'd lean, and then you'd get to a certain point and the weight would start to take over, and you could sort of feel it sort of accelerating the amount of lean that you were putting into the bike. It did reduce as we burnt more fuel off. You noticed it much less towards the end of the day, but it's just something to bear in mind. It also meant when you were getting the bike off the stand and you were manual handling it and moving it around, it did feel a little bit top heavy just on that full tank of fuel. Otherwise, the handling of the bike is actually okay. You can push on and it will only really start to feel like it's out of its comfort zone when you push really hard, or if the road gets a little bit bumpy. It's at those times that you can see where the budget suspension is coming in. It hasn't quite got that finesse over real sort of washboard roads that, you know, more premium suspension would have. I know it's KYB suspension, but it's probably at the lower end of the adjustable KYB suspension that they produce, but it can feel a little bit choppy in that sort of situation. Moving on to the braking system, it's a Nissin system. It's a system we all know. It's the same calipers that were fitted to the Tiger Sport 660 that I was riding a couple of weeks ago. But on this, they just feel very underpowered compared to even the Triumph. I don't know whether it's a ratio between the master cylinder and the caliper, or maybe a pad compound that they've used, but it's a very progressive lever anyway, and the brakes haven't got masses of initial bite, but there also isn't loads and loads of power when you get into the brakes. So the first couple of really sharp corners that I went into at speed, I was grabbing all the brakes as hard as I could to get the thing stopped, to get it round the corner. Again, if you're a newer rider, you're probably not going to be too bothered about that sort of thing, but it is definitely something to bear in mind. There are probably some things that you can do if you bought one of these and you weren't happy with the brakes. Get some, you know, stickier pad compounds and probably some braided lines as well would probably massively improve the braking performance of the bike. But again, do you want to buy a bike like this and then start spending money on it, or do you just want to buy a bike like this and then start riding it? That's the real question. Conversely to the front brake, the rear brake is actually really strong, very powerful, and the lever feel is nice on that one. It's the only end that I got the ABS triggering on today, and it was great for when we were doing the camera car tracking, because you have to follow very, very close to the camera car with the cameraman hanging out the back. So you always ride in the back brake, and it makes it super handy around town, so you can always just use the back brake if you need to tighten a line in a corner as well. So on that respect, the rear brake is very good. Other points of note are that the steering feels quite light. Despite the top heavy centre of gravity that I mentioned earlier on, the actual steering of it is pretty light, which made riding around town and navigating through Melton Mowbray a little bit earlier on today actually very, very easy and very, very stress-free. We didn't do any off-road, obviously. I'm only talking about the on-road handling, but for me, without quite a lot of suspension adjustment, it feels like it'd probably be too hard for most people to ride off-road, because it feels like a road-tuned adventure bike in every sense, really. I know it's got spoked wheels and everything else and Torrance tyres, but you'd have to do putting a lot of work to the suspension to get it to a place where I'd be happy to sort of take it off-road. I'm going to move very quickly onto the comfort, because it's a tale of two halves really. The ergonomics are good, so the seat to bar and seat to peg position is good. The pegs are probably a little bit high for some riders. I did find that on the Morbidelli that I was riding the other week as well. So on the ergonomics front, it's very good. The screen works well on its tallest setting, and I was sat in a nice little calm bubble of still air, and there isn't too much vibration coming up through the pegs, the seat or the bars. The seat comfort was an issue for me. I found the seat to be really too hard. By the end of the day's riding, I did have a very numb bum, and there are more comfortable seats out there. It's not got a lot of contour to it, and which meant these sort of sharp edges here were sort of cutting in by the end of the day. So that would be something that you'd need to address if you're going to do long distances on your Voge. So the verdict, is it really a viable alternative to something like a Honda CB500X? There are a lot of good points to this bike, and they all come down to its price point and the things that you're getting for not a lot of money, including, like, you know, the extra plug sockets up on the dash there, the centre stand, you know, tyre pressure monitoring system if that's important to you. You know, you've got the crash bars included on this, and they don't come on some other adventure bikes in the class. You'd have to spec them up, which would again make those more expensive option than this. A bit like the Morbidelli that I rode a couple of weeks ago though, it has got its foreballs, it's got its little things that it does differently to a European or a Japanese bike, and you're either going to just have to like them or lump them, because there's not a lot you can do to change most of them. For me, I think it's bikes like this, there's two types of people that are going to buy them, or there's two types of riders really in the UK. There's the ones who will always go for the named brand stuff, the Hondas, the Yamahas, Suzukis and so on, and would never even think of buying a bike from China. And there's the other people that see them as a cost-effective and economical way of getting a bike that's got a lot of kit and features fitted to it as standard for not a lot of outlay. Overall, it's a pretty good bike. Would I be running out of my door to my nearest dealership to go and buy one tomorrow? I'm not sure. There are probably other adventure bikes in this segment that would probably sort of take my eye a little bit more than this one, but it's early days for Voge. They've not been going long, so let's see what they next bring out, but I guarantee they will get better with every iteration. Anyway folks, that is enough from me. I've been Toad for Visordown. If you've liked that one, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you can stay up to date with all of our latest videos. And for all the latest news, reviews and motorcycle features, get yourself over to Visordown.com.